What if the only way to prove you were innocent was to confess to a crime you didn't commit? That was the terrifying reality for those caught up in the Salem witch trials. While more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft, their fate ultimately came down to one simple, impossible choice: confess and live, or deny your guilt and be executed. This wasn't a search for justice. It was a machine built to find people guilty. The legal system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. From the moment you were accused, every step of the process, from the evidence to the trial itself, was engineered to make sure you wouldn't walk away free. To really get how this happened, we have to go back to the beginning. The year 1692, and Salem Village, Massachusetts, is a community living on a knife's edge. They're dealing with the constant threat of attack during King William's War, economic hardship, and a deep-seated Puritan belief in the very real, physical presence of the devil. It was a perfect storm of fear and resentment, just waiting for a spark. That spark came from inside the home of the local minister, Samuel Parris. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, started having bizarre, violent fits. They screamed, threw things, twisted their bodies into unnatural shapes, and cried out that they were being pinched and bitten by invisible forces. When a doctor couldn't find any physical cause, he gave a diagnosis: bewitchment. Pressured to name their tormentors, the girls pointed their fingers at 3 women on the absolute fringes of society: Sarah Good, a homeless woman who begged for money; Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman embroiled in a legal battle over her late husband's property; and Tituba, the Parris family's enslaved servant. They were the perfect targets: poor, unpopular, and utterly defenseless. And they were the first to be fed into a legal machine that was just getting warmed up. The single most important reason the Salem trials were impossible to fight was the court's acceptance of spectral evidence. This was testimony from accusers who claimed a suspect spirit, or specter, was flying out of their body to attack them. The afflicted girls would writhe and scream in the courtroom, claiming the ghost of the accused was pinching, biting, or choking them at that very moment, even while the accused person stood silently right in front of them. Seriously, how do you defend against that? How can you prove your spirit was at home with you, asleep in bed? You can't. There's no alibi for your ghost. This created a perfect closed loop. The only proof of the crime was the word of the accuser. Any attempt to deny it was seen as just more proof of guilt. After all, the devil was making you lie, and it didn't stop there. Magistrates would physically search for a witch's teat or devil's mark, any mole or blemish on the body where they believed a demon would suckle. Another common test was to make the accused recite the Lord's Prayer from memory. The thinking was that a witch couldn't possibly say the holy words without stumbling. In a packed, terrifying courtroom with dozens of people screaming and magistrates shouting at you, it's no wonder so many failed this simple test out of pure fear. The system wasn't built on a presumption of innocence. It was designed to find you guilty. These public examinations weren't trials. They were interrogations meant to force a confession. They took place in the Salem Village Meeting House, which was packed with the entire community. Imagine being dragged into that room, already considered guilty, to face magistrates like John Hathorne. His questions weren't looking for the truth. They were traps. What evil spirit have you familiarity with? Why do you hurt these children? Every denial was met with more intense screaming from the afflicted girls and more aggressive questions from the judges. This is where Tituba, one of the first accused, made a decision that changed everything. After days of relentless questioning and, according to tradition, being beaten by her enslaver Samuel Parris, she realized what the court wanted to hear. She confessed. But she didn't just confess. She gave them a blockbuster story, a vivid account of riding on a broomstick, signing the devil's book, and meeting with other witches. Crucially, she told them there were more witches in Salem. Her confession turned a small local incident into a massive conspiracy. It confirmed the court's worst fears and gave them a mandate to hunt for everyone else. They had a new tool. If they could pressure one person to confess and name names, they could unravel the whole plot. And here, the brutal, backward logic of the Salem trials becomes painfully clear. A pattern emerged almost immediately. Not a single person who confessed to witchcraft was ever executed, but every single person who maintained their innocence, went to trial, and was found guilty, was hanged. Your life hung on one choice: tell a lie and live, or stick to the truth and die. Just look at the tragic story of Rebecca Nurse. She was a 71-year-old, devout, and widely respected church member. When she was accused, the community was stunned. Dozens of her neighbors signed a petition testifying to her good character. At her trial, the jury actually returned a verdict of not guilty, but the courtroom exploded in protest. Furious, the magistrates demanded the jury reconsider. They did, and Rebecca Nurse was condemned. On July 19, 1692, the elderly woman was hanged on Gallows Hill, insisting she was innocent until the very end. Her story is a sharp contrast to the dozens of accused who saw the writing on the wall. They confessed. They admitted to signing the devil's book and tormenting the innocent. In doing so, they saved their own lives. But every confession they gave the court was more evidence and a fresh list of names, fueling the cycle of accusation and death. The stories of people like Rebecca Nurse show just how impossible the situation was for the accused. It's a powerful reminder of how easily justice can be twisted. If you find these explorations into the darker side of history compelling, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what we uncover next. For the 19 people who refused to confess, the final stop was Gallows Hill. But one man's fate was so uniquely cruel that it perfectly captures the system's barbarity. His name was Giles Corey. Corey was an 81-year-old farmer. When he was accused, he saw the legal trap for what it was. He knew that if he pleaded, the spectral evidence would guarantee his conviction. And under the law at the time, anyone convicted of a felony had to forfeit their property to the state. Corey was determined to make sure his farm passed to his sons-in-law. So, he made a shocking choice. He refused to enter a plea at all. He wouldn't say guilty, and he wouldn't say not guilty. By standing mute, he legally couldn't be tried. The punishment for this was an archaic and horrifying procedure called peine forte et dure, or pressing. Giles Corey was taken to an open field, stripped, and a heavy wooden board was laid across his chest. For 2 days, the sheriff piled heavy stones on the board, one by one, slowly crushing him. They would periodically demand he enter a plea. His only response, which has echoed through history, was more weight. He died under the crushing load, but his protest worked. Because he was never tried or convicted, his estate passed to his family. Just 3 days after his agonizing death, his wife, Martha Corey, was hanged. The hysteria finally broke when the accusers started aiming too high, eventually naming the wife of the governor himself, Sir William Phips. Realizing the madness had gone too far, Phips dissolved the special court in October 1692, and most importantly, banned the use of spectral evidence in any new trials. The remaining prisoners were eventually released, but it wasn't before 19 people had been hanged, one man pressed to death, and at least 5 others had died in the filthy jails. In the years that followed, many of those involved, including one of the judges, Samuel Sewall, and a key accuser, Ann Putnam Jr., publicly apologized. The colony even held a day of fasting to pray for forgiveness for the tragedy they'd caused. But the lesson of Salem was written in blood. The system wasn't just flawed, it was designed for conviction. It ignored a principle that would one day become fundamental to American justice, a sentiment best expressed by the minister Increase Mather, who protested the trials by writing, "It were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than that one innocent person should be condemned."